There are launches that simply try to survive, and then there are launches that try to prove something. Flight 12 belongs to the second kind. For years, every Starship that left the pad carried the same quiet question into the sky. Will it hold together long enough to teach us something before it breaks? Each flight was a gamble against fire and pressure and the brutal physics of falling back to Earth. The goal was always the same: just stay alive a little longer than last time. But this flight is different. This time the vehicle is not asking permission to exist, it is asking to go to work. In roughly 65 minutes, this machine intends to do almost everything a real spacecraft is ever asked to do: launch a completely redesigned ship, light a wall of upgraded engines, release a record number of satellites, restart an engine in the cold silence of space, and then deliberately fly home with a piece of its own armor missing just to see what happens. Each of these alone would be a milestone. Together, in a single mission, they form something that looks less like a test and more like a rehearsal for the future. To understand why this matters, you have to look at how much of the vehicle has actually changed. This is not the same Starship the world watched on earlier flights with small tweaks bolted on. This is a clean-sheet redesign, an architecture built from the ground up not just to reach orbit, but to come home, get refueled, and fly again. Reusable infrastructure, not a one-time firework. Start with the booster, the enormous first stage that does the heavy lifting in those first violent seconds. The old four-fin design is gone. In its place sit three larger, stronger fins mounted lower on the rocket where they can better survive the searing heat of separation. The mechanisms that move them are now tucked safely inside the fuel tank itself, hidden away from the worst of the inferno. The ring that used to help with hot staging, once thrown away after every flight, has been folded permanently into the booster as reusable hardware. Nothing wasted, everything kept. Inside, the changes are even bolder. The plumbing that feeds fuel to the engines has been massively enlarged, big enough to ignite all 33 engines in near-perfect unison, within a fraction of a second, and to throw the booster into its mid-air flip with new authority. The old fire suppression system has been removed entirely. Instead of fighting stray gases with extra equipment, the design simply manages leaks better and lets the engine's own ferocious heat burn the danger away. Simpler, cleaner. More like a finished product than a prototype. The upper stage, the ship that actually reaches space, has been reborn around two ideas: less weight and more trust in itself. Each steering flap now runs on a single actuator driven by three motors, replacing the old twin actuator setup. Fewer parts, less to go wrong, but with backups built in so a failure does not mean disaster. And for the first time, this flight carries hardware tied directly to humanity's return to the moon. Docking interfaces, orbital refueling connections, the quiet beginnings of a vehicle that may one day ferry astronauts down to the lunar surface. The electronics have been rebuilt into compact power units capable of delivering nearly 9 megawatts at their peak, enough to run a small town. And the engines themselves, the new generation of Raptors, now push harder while weighing less, their delicate sensors and controls protected inside the engine's own body, shielded from the violence they create. Even the ground has evolved to match the machine. The launch pad now wears a two-way flame diverter built to survive all 33 engines roaring at once, that wall of fire pouring down with the force of a small earthquake. The tower's great mechanical arms, the ones that reach out to catch a falling booster, have been shortened and rebuilt with faster systems for the day they try again. Add all of it together and the numbers become almost hard to believe. Fully reusable, this vehicle could carry beyond 100 tons to orbit, nearly triple what earlier versions promised. But the hardware is only half the story. The real drama is in the timeline. The mission begins, as it always does, with pure violence. By 45 seconds after liftoff, the ship hits the moment of maximum stress, the point where the atmosphere fights back hardest, all 33 engines still driving it upward at full thrust. Then comes the defining heartbeat of the climb. At 2 minutes and 24 seconds, the ship lights its own engines while still attached to the booster, a fiery handoff in the sky, before the two stages tear apart and go their separate ways. The booster now begins its journey home. It flips itself around and reignites its engines for the boost back burn, the maneuver that turns it from a rising rocket into a returning one. This time it does not need the full cluster, only a portion of its engines. And thanks to fuel lines so large they rival the entire first stage of an older rocket, it can feed propellant fast enough to handle these sudden, sharp changes in direction. The burn lasts about a minute, bending the booster's path back toward the water. Then comes more than 3 minutes of controlled falling, the vehicle riding its new fins down through the thickening air, fighting to stay stable as the planet rushes up to meet it. In the final moments, the center engines fire one last time. The booster slows, steadies, and settles softly down onto the sea under full control. There is no attempt to catch it in the tower's arms this time. That trick has already been proven on earlier flights, But this is the very first journey of an entirely new design, and the priority now is clean data, not the risk of damaging the freshly built launch site. Sometimes restraint is its own kind of confidence. But while the booster's story is ending, the ship's story is only beginning. Free of the booster, the ship coasts along a long, quiet arc, engines silent, gliding through the stillness above the world. This calm stretch hides some of the most important experiments of the entire flight, the ones that matter for everything that comes after: refueling in orbit, hauling cargo, one day the moon. About 17 minutes in, the ship attempts what may be the single most meaningful demonstration of the day. It opens up and releases 22 satellite stand-ins, far more than the handful carried on the previous flight. For years, payload work was an afterthought. Some flights carried nothing. Others barely cracked the door open just to prove the hinge worked. The mission then was survival, launch, separate, endure re-entry, but not anymore. Now the question has changed from can it live to can it do the job? To make that leap, the deployment system was upgraded with faster mechanisms and more powerful drivers. Built to push satellites out quickly, one after another, the way a real operational flight someday will. And the payload test does more than just release satellites. 2 modified inspection satellites peel away and turn back toward the ship, scanning its heat shield while still in flight, hunting for missing tiles, gaps, any sign of damage across its skin. Special white tiles were even added in places to act as visual markers, easy targets for the cameras to track. The dream behind all this is quietly enormous. To teach the ship to inspect itself in space, to look itself over and decide whether its armor is healthy enough to bring it safely home, all without an army of engineers crawling over it on the ground after every flight. Then deeper into the mission comes a test that sounds almost humble: restarting a single engine in space. On paper, lighting one engine seems minor. In reality, it is one of the most essential skills any true spacecraft can have. A vehicle bound for the moon or Mars or simply for orbit must be able to wake its engines back up after long stretches of cold, silent coasting in order to change course, slow down, or aim itself home. The test asks the most practical question there is: when we truly need it to fire again, will it? And finally, the homecoming. Near the 48th minute, the ship turns back toward the atmosphere and begins to fall, plunging into the searing heat of re-entry. But here lies the boldest choice of all. One heat shield tile has been deliberately removed, on purpose, not because of carelessness but because the team wants to see exactly how heat spreads when a single piece of armor is gone, how damage in one spot creeps toward its neighbors. The goal is no longer just to survive, it is to understand. Because a vehicle meant to fly again and again cannot simply hope nothing goes wrong. It has to know what happens when something does. The mission ends a little past the 65-minute mark, with the ship coming down in the ocean on the far side of the world, closing out what may be the most ambitious flight yet attempted. And that is the quiet truth hiding inside all the fire and the numbers. This flight was never really about reaching space. We have done that countless times. This was about proving that a spacecraft can launch, work, return, and one day rise again, not as a miracle but as a routine. Because the rockets that change history are not the ones that fly once and astonish us. They are the ones that fly again and again until the impossible becomes ordinary. And on this day, in barely over an hour, we got our first real glimpse of that ordinary future taking shape.